The silence in Lee So-hee's Suwon apartment wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a presence, heavy and familiar, settling into the spaces her late husband Min-jun once filled. It echoed in the clink of her solitary teacup against its saucer, in the rustle of newspaper pages turned with no one to share a headline with. 5 years. 5 years since Min-jun's warmth had faded from their small, meticulously kept home, leaving behind a quiet ache that time had dulled but not erased. At 62, So-hee moved through her days with a quiet elegance, her silver-streaked hair tied back neatly, her hands, which had so tenderly cared for Min-jun through his long illness, now often clasped in her lap, a silent testament to her unease. Dinner was a simple affair. A small bowl of rice, kimchi, a clear vegetable soup. She ate slowly, the television murmuring in the background, a companion that offered noise but no conversation. Min-jun would have commented on the soup, perhaps asked for a second helping of kimchi. The memory brought a faint, sad smile. He had been a man of simple pleasures and profound kindness. Now the silence pressed in, amplifying the emptiness of the chair opposite hers. Later the phone rang, its chime momentarily startling her. "Yoma, are you well?" Park So-yeon's voice, her only daughter, was a welcome warmth from Busan, where she lived with her own bustling family. "So-yeon, yes, I'm fine. Just finished dinner. Eating properly, I hope." So-yeon's concern was a familiar refrain. "You sound a little tired." So-hee forced a brighter tone. "Just the usual. How are the children?" They talked for a while, the conversation a lifeline, yet So-hee carefully skirted the depth of her loneliness. She didn't want to be a burden. So-yeon had her own life, her own worries. "Oma, there's a new program at the community center for seniors. Arts and crafts, some light exercise. Maybe you should try it? Get out a bit?" So-yeon had suggested it before. "Perhaps, dear, I'll think about it." So-hee had replied, non-committal. The thought of navigating a room full of strangers was daunting, but the loneliness, like a persistent vine, kept tightening its grip. One crisp autumn afternoon, clutching a flyer So-yeon had mailed her, So-hee found herself standing outside the local Bokjiwon, the community welfare center. The murmur of voices and laughter drifted out. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The room was bright, filled with seniors engaged in various activities. She felt a wave of self-consciousness, an intruder in an established world. She found a quiet corner, observing. A new face? A pleasant baritone voice startled her. She turned to see a man, perhaps a few years her senior, with a kind smile and neatly combed dark hair that was perhaps a little too perfectly dyed. He was dressed smartly in a pressed shirt and slacks. "I'm Kang Ji-hoon. Welcome." "Lee So-hee," she managed, a slight bow of her head. Ji-hoon was easy to talk to. He spoke of his own retirement, his late wife, and a shared sense of wanting to fill the quiet days. He listened, or seemed to listen, with an attentiveness that So-hee hadn't experienced in years. He made her laugh, a rusty, surprising sound. The next few weeks passed in a gentle blur of coffee dates and leisurely walks in Hwaseong Fortress's sprawling park. Ji-hoon was a constant, charming presence. He praised her quiet strength, her kindness, the subtle artistic touches in her modest clothing. He spoke of wanting a simple companionship, someone to share meals and conversations with, someone to take care of each other in their twilight years. His words were like balm to So-hee's solitary soul. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench overlooking the Suwoncheon stream, Ji-hoon took her hand. His was warm, slightly calloused. "So-hee-see," he began, his voice earnest. "I know this is soon, but I feel we understand each other. I would be honored if you would consider marrying me." So-hee's heart fluttered. Marriage? It was a thought she hadn't dared to entertain. Yet, the prospect of shared evenings, of a voice in the quiet apartment, was overwhelmingly tempting. She discussed it with So-yeon, her voice trembling slightly. "He seems kind, Yoma," So-yeon said, a note of caution in her tone. "But please, be sure, don't rush into anything just because you're lonely." So-hee assured her daughter she would be careful. But Ji-hoon's attentiveness, his promises of companionship, and the deep, gnawing loneliness were a potent combination. A week later, she accepted his proposal. A small, simple ceremony was planned. Hope, fragile yet insistent, began to bloom in her heart. Ji-hoon moved into So-hee's apartment a week after their modest wedding ceremony at the local district office. The initial days were filled with a forced cheerfulness, an awkward dance of two lives merging. So he found herself bustling about, eager to create a harmonious home. She cooked his favourite dishes, learned how he liked his tea, and tried to anticipate his needs. Ji-hoon, in turn, was complimentary, his practiced smile readily deployed, but the veneer soon began to crack. So he noticed that Ji-hoon had no discernible plans to contribute financially. When she gently broached the subject of household expenses, he'd wave a dismissive hand. "My pension is very small, so here you are, tied up in some old commitments. Don't you worry your pretty head about it. We'll manage with yours for now." Her late husband's survivor pension and her own modest savings, she realized with a dawning unease, were now theirs. Housework was another matter. Ji-hoon, it turned out, was entirely inept, or so he claimed. "Oh, I'm no good at that, dear." He'd chuckle if she asked him to help with the dishes. "You're so much better at it." Or he'd feign a sudden weariness, retreating to the sofa with a sigh. So he, accustomed to managing her home alone, found herself doing everything. Her workload doubled rather than halved. Slowly, subtly, Ji-hoon began to alter the landscape of her sanctuary. His bulky armchair, purchased without consulting her, appeared in the sunniest spot in the living room, displacing her favourite reading nook. His fishing magazines and newspapers cluttered the coffee table she always kept clear. Her small study, where she sometimes painted watercolours, became his preferred napping room. Her personal, cherished space began to feel less her own, subtly colonised. An internal monologue of unease began to play in So-hee's mind. "He's still settling in," she'd tell herself. "Men of his generation are often like that about housework. He means well." But a small, cold knot of doubt was forming in her stomach. The financial drain became more apparent. Ji-hoon developed a taste for more expensive brands of coffee, for specific cuts of meat. So-hee rarely bought for herself. When they occasionally ate out, always at places he suggested, often pricier than she was comfortable with, he'd make a show of patting his pockets, then exclaim with feigned surprise, "Oh dear, I seem to have left my wallet at home. You'll get this one, won't you, darling?" So-hee, averse to making a scene, would quietly pay. His moods also required careful navigation. If she questioned an expense, or if one of his subtle requests wasn't met promptly, he wouldn't raise his voice. Instead, a curtain of passive aggression would descend. He'd become quiet, sigh frequently, or make melancholic comments about not wanting to be a burden, which invariably made So-hee feel guilty and anxious. The peaceful companionship she had yearned for was morphing into a constant, low-level stress of managing his comforts and his feelings. Her quiet routines, the bedrock of her solitary contentment, were shattered. She often found herself eating alone again, as Ji-hoon would either sleep late or announce he was meeting an old friend, an outing for which he never seemed to have funds. So-yeon called one Saturday morning. "Oma, you sound breathless. Is everything all right?" "Oh, just tidying up, dear," So-hee said, trying to keep the weariness from her voice. Ji-hoon had invited two of his fishing buddies over the previous evening without much notice, and they had left a trail of snack wrappers and empty beer cans. He was still asleep. "How is Mr. Kang?" So-yeon asked, her tone carefully neutral. "He's fine. He's enjoying his retirement." So-hee couldn't bring herself to say more. Admitting her marriage was already showing cracks felt like a personal failure, a confirmation of her daughter's unspoken fears. "You'd tell me if something was wrong, wouldn't you, Yama?" "Of course, dear." "Don't worry so much," So-hee said, a little too quickly. The lie sat uncomfortably on her tongue. After the call, she looked around her living room, at Ji-hoon's overflowing ashtray on her polished side table, and felt a wave of despair. This wasn't the life she had envisioned. Soon, Ji-hoon began to borrow small sums of money. "Just until my pension payment comes through," he'd say, his expression earnest. 100,000 won, just to tide me over. The pension payment day would come and go, with no mention of repayment. When So-hee once gently reminded him, he looked wounded. "Are you saying you don't trust me, your husband?" he'd asked, his voice soft with reproach. She'd quickly backed down, ashamed. The most significant encroachment came when Ji-hoon, with an air of great excitement, announced a fantastic investment opportunity. He'd been talking to an old, very successful friend. "It's a sure thing, So-hee," he declared one evening, his eyes gleaming. A small development project. We put in a bit now, and in 6 months we could double our money." So he felt a chill. "We? Well, you mostly," he amended smoothly. "You have those savings from, it's just sitting there, not doing much. This could really secure our future, allow us to travel, enjoy things." He gestured vaguely, painting a picture of a lavish lifestyle she had never desired. He mentioned a figure. A substantial portion of the money Minjun had painstakingly saved, the nest egg she relied on for her own security. The pressure was immense. He brought it up daily, his tone shifting from enthusiastic to subtly impatient. "We don't want to miss out, So-hee. Opportunities like this don't come often at our age." Her internal conflict reached a fever pitch. The image of Minjun's careful, calloused hands counting out bills, saving for their quiet future, flashed in her mind. So-yeon's worried voice echoed, "Be sure, Ioma." She started to see Ji-hoon's earlier behaviors, the financial carelessness, the entitlement, the subtle manipulations, in a new, harsh light. His charm now seemed like a well-rehearsed performance. The final straw was deceptively small. So-hee had always bought a particular, inexpensive brand of Maxim coffee. Ji-hoon preferred a pricier, imported instant coffee. One morning she had forgotten to buy his brand. When he discovered only her Maxim Gold in the cupboard, he didn't shout. He simply sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation of disappointment, and pushed his cup away. "It's all right," he said, his voice laden with martyrdom. "I suppose I'll just go without." He then retreated to the bedroom, the silence he left behind more damning than any angry outburst. So he stood in her kitchen, the familiar scent of her apartment now tinged with something sour. The weight of his unspoken accusation, his constant, subtle demands, the looming pressure of the investment, all coalesced into a single, unbearable point. She looked at the wilting orchid on her windowsill, a gift from Minjun that she had struggled to keep alive since Ji-hoon's arrival. It seemed to mirror her own spirit. Enough. That evening, So-hee served dinner in a silence that felt different, charged. Ji-hoon, still maintaining his air of a wronged man, picked at his food. She watched him, her earlier anxieties replaced by a cold, hard clarity. She had been a fool, blinded by loneliness and a desperate hope. After they had finished, and Ji-hoon had settled into his armchair with the remote control, So he spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Jun-si, we need to talk." He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "About what, dear?" She sat opposite him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to still their trembling. "About this marriage, about us." She began, calmly at first, to lay out her feelings. She spoke of his financial assumptions, his complete lack of contribution to their shared life, not just in money but in effort, in care. She spoke of how her home, her sanctuary, no longer felt like her own. "I feel," she said, her voice gaining strength, "like I am merely a housekeeper and a source of funds for you." Ji-hoon's affable mask began to slip. "Now, So-hee, that's not fair. I provide companionship. Isn't that what you wanted?" "Companionship is a two-way street, Ji-hoon-si. It involves mutual respect, mutual support. You expect me to cater to your every need, to fund your lifestyle, while you offer nothing tangible in return. And now, this investment, you want me to risk my entire security for some vague promise from your friend." He tried to deflect, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "You're being too sensitive, So-hee. You're misunderstanding my intentions. I only want what's best for us." He even tried to feign a sudden chest pain, a hand clutching his shirt. "My heart, I'm not feeling well." But So-hee had seen through too many of his performances. The image of Minjun, who had faced his final illness with quiet dignity, never once complaining or trying to manipulate her, flashed through her mind. The thought of So-yeon, who loved her unconditionally, also bolstered her. "No, Ji-hoon-si," she said, her voice steady now, devoid of its earlier tremor. "I understand perfectly. I can no longer live like this. This is not a marriage. This is an arrangement that benefits only you." She took a deep breath. The words, once unthinkable, now felt like a release. "I want a divorce." Ji-hoon stared at her, his jaw slack, the charming facade completely gone, replaced by disbelief and then a flicker of anger. He had clearly underestimated her, mistaken her quiet nature for weakness. "Divorce? Are you serious? After all we've shared." "What have we shared, Ji-hoon-si?" So he asked, a profound sadness in her voice but no wavering in her eyes. "My home, my money, my peace of mind. Yes, we've shared those, but you have shared nothing of yourself. The fight, when it came, was not loud or violent, but it was draining. Ji-hoon alternated between pleading, accusing, and trying to guilt-trip her. He spoke of his age, his loneliness, how she was his last hope. He even, in a desperate last-ditch effort, tried to negotiate. All right, perhaps I've been a bit thoughtless. If I contribute more, if I help around the house, can we not try again? But Sohee's resolve, once ignited, was unshakable. The trust was gone, shattered by too many deceptions, too many encroachments. She had sought advice from a free legal aid service So-yeon had found for her, a quiet visit made while Ji-hoon was out on one of his mysterious walletless excursions. She knew her rights. Her apartment was solely in her name, a premarital asset. No, Ji-hoon-si, she repeated. It's too late for that. I've made my decision. Seeing her unyielding stance, his tone shifted again, becoming bitter and resentful. He muttered about ungrateful women, about how he had wasted his time. He made vague threats about making the divorce difficult, but Sohee, armed with her legal consultation, knew they were empty. Their marriage was short, childless, and his financial contributions were non-existent. The next few days were tense as Ji-hoon slowly packed his belongings, a sullen cloud hanging over the apartment. He tried one last time for a severance, a sum to help him get back on his feet. Sohee refused, her voice calm but absolute. He finally left, not with a bang, but with a resentful slam of the door, leaving behind a silence that was, for the first time in months, not oppressive but liberating. The divorce process itself was emotionally taxing, but legally straightforward. They met once more at the lawyer's office to sign the final papers, a sterile, impersonal end to a deeply personal mistake. Ji-hoon avoided her gaze. When Sohee returned to her apartment alone, truly alone for the first time since Ji-hoon's departure, the silence felt vast. It was tinged with the sadness of a failed hope, the sting of her own naivety. But beneath that, a stronger emotion was surfacing, an immense, profound relief. She walked through her rooms, touching her familiar belongings. Her armchair was back in its sunny spot. The coffee table was clear. She opened the windows wide, letting in the fresh autumn air, as if to cleanse the space of his lingering presence. Slowly, day by day, Sohee reclaimed her life. She started cooking her favorite simple meals again, a fragrant doenjang jjigae, its savory steam filling her small kitchen.